So San Gimignano is very much, it's a beautiful little town. It was actually built on the Via Francigena. The walk was there before San Gimignano, and they built San Gimignano on the walk really to give people security and a place to stay. It's a remarkable little town, but it's very much a tourist town. But they did have a market one morning, of very much a local market. So San Gimignano, as well as that, is very famous for its architecture and famous for its towers. I don't know how many towers it has, but when you approach it from the distance, it looks, sort of mini New York. So I wanted to combine the idea of the towers, the architecture, but everyday life, just a moment in time, a moment at the market. And if you think about it, if you look at the painting and look away, the idea is that everything will have changed. I'd arranged to stay in the, it's called the Carità San Vincente. It's a monastery of nuns in the middle of Siena. So really I had no idea where I was going to, what kind of place I was staying in. Talking to Sister Janetta, she was the abbess, she was telling me later on that what they did every day was to feed all the poor people in Siena. They gave them, didn't matter who they were, drunks, drug addicts, dropouts, whoever they were, people who are living in the streets. And Siena is a very rich city, so it is amazing to think that there are people living on the streets. So every day, once a day, they prepared food for whatever number of people, maybe 200 or 300 people. They came in, had a meal, as much as they wanted, and then they were back out on the street again. So I arrived in the middle of all this, and of course I had to give a hand washing the dishes. Sister Janetta was telling me that they had been doing the same thing since before the Black Death. The Black Death in Siena was in the 14th century, and 75% of the population died. And one of the duties of the convent was to bury people who, obviously, the place was in chaos with so many people dying. They buried people probably not in graves but in pits, but they did record all their names. And in the convent they still have the books, still have the records of the names in the convent. Sister Jed actually asked me, would I like to have a look at one of the books, but I thought, you never know, the last person who recorded a name might have actually had a touch of the Black Death, so I decided not to actually open the books, but just have a look from a distance. I then stayed in Siena in a hotel for another 2 or 3 days. So the painting is really putting sort of my own personal experience in Siena and part of the history of Siena together. The building, this is the Campo, which is the main square in Siena. It's not a square, it's more or less, it's saucer shaped, it's very hard to describe it. It sort of slopes down towards this big building, which is really, I think now functions as probably as always has functioned, as the city or town hall. And in Siena every year they have a race, now every year since I think before the Middle Ages, they have a race called the Palio. It's really sort of a bit of a mad dog race with guys dressed up in medieval costume. It's very, very Italian, and this is a figure which represents Sister Janetta. She wasn't exactly dressed like that. She was dressed in much more modern clothes. This figure here represents a doctor from the Middle Ages, from the time of the Black Death. They wore a sort of a cone-shaped horn, which was full of herbs, which they thought most diseases were transported by air. So malaria means bad air. So they put sort of sweet-smelling herbs into the cone and thought that would protect them. And the figure here is from a painting by Raphael from Siena. and the large guy here could be anybody. I just use them to balance the painting. This is a painting of a little village called San Quirico de Arcia. I arrived in the village about lunchtime, and it's a lovely little village. It's got Roman remains, it's got Etruscan remains. It's a typical Italian village that goes back to the year dot. But I thought the village, when I arrived in, I thought the village was quite quiet, even though it was getting on to sort of 1 o'clock, which is Italian lunchtime. If you don't have your lunch in Italy before 2 o'clock, then you just don't get it. You have to wait till dinner time. So when you're walking, especially when you're doing about 20 miles a day, or 20, 25 kilometres, it's very important to arrive somewhere round about lunchtime. So I arrived in through this little gateway here, and I sat down. This is actually more or less as it is. Sat down in the little trattoria, and the waiter came along as usual, gave me the menu. And as I was sitting there reading the menu and enjoying a glass of red wine as per usual, I noticed that people started to, well, there was a man with a bicycle, a girl with a dog, a man carrying a box, and a couple of other people. They started moving across the square towards me. Well, it looks, normal. But then somebody shouted something, and they all actually reversed back along their own steps, and completely reversed backwards. What I didn't realise is that they were making a film. Somebody probably said to me in Italian, don't go inside there, don't go in there. They're making a film. Of course, I didn't understand, and I didn't notice the camera. They had the camera in the shadows. But what I thought was that this again was a great metaphor for exactly what I was doing. Not only was I seeing everyday life, but I was seeing people making a film about everyday life. So I had a great afternoon doing sketches and drawings. I think I'm probably obviously in the film or the television program somewhere, because by the time they explained to me that I shouldn't be there, it was a bit too late. I'd already sort of wandered into a few shots. This is a watercolour. It's called Leaving Gambassi Terme. Gambassi Terme just means a heated baths near Gambassi, I presume. It was just a little village I stayed in overnight, but I thought it was so quiet. Very, very little happened, but Italian life was just carrying on. So this is early one morning in the centre of town, and the big building in the background is, I think it was the town hall, village hall. There were people in the bar, but just one moment in time in a small Italian village. This is a watercolour called I Stopped for Lunch in Viterbo. Now this is one, it is about everyday life, exactly what happened. There aren't any sort of Fellini influences or medieval influences, although Viterbo is a wonderful, beautiful medieval city. This is exactly as it was at lunchtime one day in Viterbo in a snack bar. Just people talking, smoking inside, of course, but it's obviously quite an old building, but the snack bar is quite modern. So it's just, the idea was to just capture a moment in time as it happened to me along the walk. This is a painting called All About Fellini, La Dolce Vita, or the Piazza del Popolo. So 3 names, but it's just, again, putting ideas together. When I arrived in Rome, I came across a few interesting ideas about Fellini, for example. The Piazza del Popolo, well, the Piazza del Popolo looks more or less like this, but I've moved a few things around. There are 2 very big twin churches, which would date back probably to the Middle Ages, and they would be sort of one of the main emblematic features. I read an essay by Fellini, and he does say that growing up in this particular, it's a very, very abstract, sort of surreal piazza.